Okay, so everybody's who's here, you're here physically, right? In front of your computer or in front of your phone. So let's bring the rest of you here. So bring your mind here and your hearts. And we're going to do this through a settling in practice. So this will just take a couple of minutes. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can close your eyes. If not, you can just leave them open or just have a downward gaze. And take a couple of deep breaths. And feeling your breath as you breathe in and as you breathe out. Feeling it in the place that's most easily accessible to you. So maybe feeling the air as it moves at the tip of your nose or through your nostrils, or maybe in the slight movement of your chest with each breath as your lungs expand and contract. Maybe in your diaphragm area. Or simply feeling your breath. And now moving your attention to your jaw and seeing if your jaw is relaxed. And maybe checking in with your shoulders, seeing if you're holding any tension in your shoulders. And then shifting your attention again to your belly. And seeing if your belly is relaxed. And if your eyes have been closed, you can gently open your eyes and come back to the call. And Nadia, if you can advance the slide. Okay, so we're going to dive right in here. This is an article that was published in USA Today online about what mental health professionals have been through in this pandemic over the last year. And actually, if you look at this article online, the bubble, the word bubble coming from the computer changes. And so sometimes it'll go from lonely to overwhelmed to scared to frustrated to angry. And the counselor who's sitting in the chair in the foreground has the bubble that says same. So in other words, this therapist, this counselor is counseling this person through telehealth, or these various different people through telehealth. And these people are expressing all these different emotions that they've experienced or are experiencing, and the counselor is going through the same thing. So in this article, about a half a dozen counselors, mental health professionals were interviewed. And all of them said that they had experienced some level of burnout over the last year. Many of them had taken on heavier caseloads in the last year. In fact, 84% of all counselors had increases in their caseload. And this is not 84%, this is 84% of all mental health counselors, not only the 6 that they interviewed. And there were more working with more patients who are experiencing trauma and suicidal ideation. Of course, most of these counseling sessions were through telehealth, which makes it possible. It wouldn't have been possible otherwise. But as we all know, it's so much more difficult to communicate via Zoom or whatever platform over the internet than in person. There's all kinds of interpersonal cues that we get when we're working with somebody or when we're talking with somebody in person that we don't get when we're over the internet. So it's so much harder. So counselors, as you well know, have been dealing with not just their issues professionally, but also personally in their own lives with their own children. They may be counseling and doing their work with trying to keep their kids educated through all the engagement that their own children have to do on the internet. So it's been an unprecedented year of struggle, of challenge, of trauma, and burnout. And this one quote, I think, really expresses it well. So this one counselor said, "For the first time, I believe, in my life, I've experienced symptoms of burnout. The stress comes from trying to figure out how to help people who are experiencing something new at the time that I'm experiencing something new." So nobody taught you how to deal with these kinds of struggles in the middle of a pandemic, right? So burnout is here. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so you might feel like this, you might feel like you're drowning. You might feel completely overwhelmed. And this is what we call compassion fatigue, when you're just really exhausted, when you've been giving, when you've been taking care of others and others' pain, others' emotional pain, and you're and you just feel like you can't handle anymore, you can't take anymore. And you may be as I said, you may be caregivers either professionally or personally, and it's important, or both. And it's important to remember that caregiving fatigue or compassion fatigue isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of being human. We all have limits of how much empathic distress that we can handle. People might have different limits, but we all have a limit. And when it's too much, when we get beyond that, that's when we feel like we're burned out. We have compassion fatigue or caregiving fatigue. And the result is that we might begin to resent the people that we're working with or the people that we're caring for. And this shift in attitude can be doubly concerning for people who consider themselves to be naturally compassionate. So what are some signs of caregiving fatigue? And you can put responses in the chat. How do you know when you're experiencing caregiving fatigue? Okay, disrupted sleep, not feeling compassionate, detached, irritability, being glad when clients cancel, anxiety, it's going by really quickly, tired, no more joy, blunted emotions, low tolerance. Yeah, you can see all of these. Yeah. Sad. And how does this actually happen? How does it actually happen when, how do we feel what others are feeling? And for a long time, scientists didn't know how we were able to pick up on other people's emotions. And about 25 years ago, there was a discovery, and we can go to the next slide. There was a discovery that scientists realized that there was a subset of the neurons in our brain became activated when we witnessed somebody else suffering. So our certain neurons were activated when we were suffering, when we were in pain, when we were really struggling. And a subset of those would become activated when we experienced or we watched somebody else suffering. So this can happen in lots of different ways. It can happen when we're experiencing, when we're just seeing somebody in pain. Anybody who's a parent knows that their children can pick up on their emotions. If you come home from work and you're exhausted and you're irritable or you're angry, often kids will pick up on those emotions, or your partner might pick up on those emotions. Any classroom teacher, and I was a classroom teacher for a long time, knows that if you're in a bad mood, you're in a grumpy mood, you go into the classroom, it's unbelievable how it works, but that the kids, that your students will pick up on what you're feeling, and they will become also kind of irritable or angry. We're watching a movie, a scary movie. You know, we can be sitting there at home in our living room, sitting on a couch, as safe and comfortable as can be, but we feel terrified because we're watching a scary movie. So this is what mirror neurons are responsible for. We empathically resonate with what someone else is feeling. And this has a lot of advantages. We can take care of others. We can, when we empathize with them. So there are a lot of benefits to empathically resonating with other people, but there are also some there's also some things that make life harder, right? And that's burnout. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so when I saw this image, I thought, this is what burnout is like, right? This is what burnout is like. When you feel like you're on the edge of a cliff and you have no place to go and you're just holding on, right? You're holding on for dear life and just trying to get through the day. Yeah. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, we're going to talk about how self-compassion can help, but I want to pause for a moment because I realize that we have a poll to do, which I forgot to do a little bit earlier on. So if Nadia, we can do that poll now, because I'm interested in knowing who we have in the room. So how many of you are professional caregivers, or mental health professionals, or social workers, or psychiatrists, psychologists?
Hi, my name is Josefina Lazalde, and I'm actually an LCDC counselor for an outpatient drug treatment center.
Great, thank you.
We are going to launch the poll in just a second. Oh, and folks are just doing it kind of spontaneously in the chat box too.
Okay.
So I believe that I think most folks are just starting to put it in the chat box. There you go. We have a rehabilitation specialist, domestic violence, social worker, case manager, rehabilitation specialist, LCSW, social work student, beginning MSW next fall, homeless liaison, recreation therapist, a parent educator with Buckner, public health at Epicenter, school-based therapist, LPC, social worker, caregiver, and parent, education psychologist, South Africa, school psychologist, school counselor, case manager, nurse with low-income pregnant women, new moms, LPC candidate, prevention specialist, DV case manager, psychologist, LPC, LCADC, school counselor and LPC associate, nurse supervisor, LPC school counselor, BSW, and caregiver, and stress counselor, LCSW, and researcher. Prevention specialist.
Okay, and I see in the poll, we have, oh, I can't see the percentage now.
Can you see it now? I'm sharing the poll.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Oh, so we have a range of, a lot of social workers. Okay, great. Not a lot of parents? Okay. All right, thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Nada. You can pull up the slide again, the next slide.
Oh, sure.
All right, so how can self-compassion help? How can self-compassion help with burnout and with stress and with feeling overwhelmed? And it can. That's the good news. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so through our own self-care, we can be more present for others. So when we take care of ourselves, it's like filling our own jug so that we can pour for others, right? If we don't have anything left to give, we're not able to give to others. We're not able to be there for others. So self-compassion gives us the opportunity to fill our own jugs, you know, so we can pour for others. But there's a difference between self-care and self-compassion. So when you're burned out, what is it that people tell you to do? And you can put this in the chat. What do people tell you to do when you're, you know, when you're exhausted, when you're burned out? Take a vacation, do some self-care, take a bubble bath, breathe, get a massage. Yeah. Take a mental health day. Yeah, right. So this is self-care, and these are good things. Exercise. Go outside. Yeah. These are all wonderful things. They're all things that are enormously helpful. However, there's one problem with them, and that's that often you can't do them in the moment when you're feeling wiped out, you're feeling stressed. What self-compassion offers us are practices that we can do in the moment when we're feeling really exhausted, you know, when we're feeling at the end of our rope. And we're going to do a couple of those practices in a minute. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between caregiver fatigue and compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue. So I've been using these words interchangeably. I don't think I've used empathy fatigue, but compassion fatigue and caregiver fatigue, I've been using interchangeably. There's really a difference. Empathy fatigue really is what I've been talking about when you're taking care of others, when you're constantly putting out energy, when you're and you're reaching your breaking point. That's empathy fatigue or caregiver fatigue. What you need at that time when you're feeling that way is you actually need more compassion. You need compassion for yourself, and you need to generate compassion for others. And that's different than empathy fatigue. In fact, there is a research study by Tanya Singer and Olga Klemicki, in 2014, I believe it was published, where they taught two groups of people different practices. They taught compassion practices to one group and empathy practices to the other group. And they did this over a period of time. And then they showed both groups a film that had a lot of painful images, a lot of images of people suffering, people really struggling. And they looked at what was going on in their brains. And there were completely different neural networks that became activated between the two groups. So empathy, in other words, people who were using the empathy tools, the neural network that became activated was completely different than the one that became activated with the compassion group. And the empathy group expressed that it was really, really much harder for them to endure seeing these images than it was for the compassion group. So when we're able to generate compassion, warmth from the heart, feelings of generosity, feelings of giving for others and for ourselves, we don't get as burned out. So can we go to the next slide, please? So a quote from the Dalai Lama: for someone to develop genuine compassion towards others, first they must have a basis upon which to cultivate compassion. And that basis is the ability to connect to one's own feelings and to care for one's own welfare. Caring for others requires caring for oneself. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to do our first self-compassion practice, and this is called supportive touch. Supportive touch is something that we readily do for others when we have a friend who's struggling, who is having a hard time. We would think nothing of giving them a hug, putting our arm around them, maybe patting them on the back. We give them some kind of supportive touch. But we don't do this for ourselves. We're just not taught to, it's just not in our culture. But we can learn to. Sometimes when people first learn how to do supportive touch for themselves, it feels a little awkward or uncomfortable. But that's just like anything new. Anything new might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but sometimes not. Sometimes it just feels good. So we're going to try this out. And what I'm going to do is offer a number of different supportive touch gestures that you can try. And you can close your eyes if that's more comfortable for you. Sometimes it's easier to get in touch with the feeling when your eyes are closed. I saw briefly a chat go by. I'm not good at looking at chats when I'm giving a talk, but I saw something about COVID go by. And yeah, so this is something that COVID has prevented us from doing, right? And it's been really hard. It's been really, really hard. It's one of the hardest things about COVID is not being able to comfort others physically. Yeah. So hopefully this will all change soon. Okay, so we're going to practice or try out some of these supportive touch gestures. And you can close your eyes if you would like. So first, maybe just putting your two hands together. Just maybe rubbing your hands together and noticing what that feels like. Maybe even giving yourself a hand massage. Notice the feeling, one hand against the other. Now maybe crossing your arms and maybe stroking your upper arms. Maybe giving yourself a hug. putting one hand on your cheek and maybe just stroking your cheek. With one hand. Noticing what that feels like. Or maybe cradling your face with both hands. Bringing your attention to where your hands touch your cheeks. Notice what that feeling is like. Maybe putting one hand on your heart. Or maybe even making small circles with your hand over your heart. Or maybe two hands over your heart. Notice the slight pressure of your hands on your heart. You can make a fist with one hand and put it over your heart. This is kind of a sign of or a feeling of strength. And putting the other hand on top of it. Notice what that feels like. Okay. So if your eyes have been closed, you can open your eyes. And hopefully you found one or two supportive gestures that feel good for you, or maybe you have one already that you use that's comforting to you, and you certainly keep using that. That works for you. Yeah, and let's go to the next slide. So in a minute, I'm going to do another practice called compassion with equanimity. But I want you to talk about this word equanimity first. It's not one that we use a lot. So it means, among other things, balance. It means having a larger perspective and being able to handle a certain amount of challenge or difficulty or pain without spinning out, without over exaggerating or without it taking over, taking over our emotional lives, being able to have a certain sense of perspective and balance. So it's not cold detachment, but arises from the deep understanding of the transient, interdependent nature of reality. And it gives us the emotional space to be able to handle whatever we need to handle. So, okay, so I'd like to do this practice with you now. So again, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can close your eyes, but certainly you can keep them open. And if you're not already in a comfortable position, you can find a comfortable position. Take a couple of deep breaths to settle into your body and into this moment, this present moment. And if you found a supportive touch that was comforting for you, you can use it now, maybe a hand on your heart or one hand holding the other hand, maybe stroking your cheek. Just as a reminder to bring affectionate awareness to your experience and to yourself. So now please bring to mind someone you're caring for who is exhausting you or frustrating you. Someone you care about who is suffering. Because we're just starting out with this practice, it's best to choose someone who is not your child, as this can be a more complicated dynamic. And visualize the person and the caregiving situation clearly in your mind and feel the struggle in your own body. Now, please listen carefully to these words, letting them gently roll through your mind. Everyone is on their own life journey. I am not the cause of this person's suffering, nor is it entirely within my power to make it go away, even though I wish I could. Moments like these can be difficult to bear, yet I may still try to help if I can. And aware of the stress you're carrying in your body, inhale fully and deeply, drawing compassion inside your body and filling every cell of your body with compassion. Letting yourself be soothed by inhaling deeply and by giving yourself the compassion you need. As you exhale, sending out compassion to the person who's associated with your discomfort. And continue breathing compassion in and out, allowing your body to gradually find a natural breathing rhythm, letting your body breathe itself. One for me, one for you. In for me, out for you. Breathing in for me. Out for you. And occasionally scanning your inner landscape for any distress and responding by inhaling compassion for yourself and exhaling compassion for others. And if you find that anyone needs extra compassion, directing your breath in that direction. Noticing how your body is caressed from the inside as you breathe. Letting yourself float on an ocean of compassion. A limitless ocean that embraces all suffering. And listening to these words once again. Everyone is on their own life journey. I am not the cause of this person's suffering, nor is it entirely within my power to make it go away, even though I wish I could. Moments like these can be difficult to bear. Yet I may still try to help if I can. Now letting go of the practice and allowing yourself to be exactly as you are in this moment. Exactly as you are. And whenever you feel ready, you can gently open your eyes. And just taking a moment to allow this practice to settle. And notice what you're feeling after doing this practice. Yeah, and if you'd like, you can put in the chat how you're feeling, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and share what you're feeling, that's or what this was like for you, you can do that. In fact, that would be great. Increased body awareness, calm and content, happy.
I think for me,
Yeah,
I get so busy in my day that I
reading the
really,
chat.
I really
Or
feel
actually,
to,
Nadia, could you read the chat for me?
I'm sorry, Karen, I think Stephanie Nero Todd was speaking just now. So I
I'm
want,
curious whether anybody,
um, just a second.
whether anybody noticed any shifts or anything changing with the equanimity phrases. So, you know, again, the equanimity phrases were everyone is on their own life journey. I'm not the cause of this person's suffering. Is my sound off?
I think so. Stephanie,
hear
I
me?
think her sound is off.
Is my sound off?
No, her sound is off.
Oh, my sound is off. Let's try something. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear her.
We can hear you. You can't hear us.
Oh, I wonder why.
Yeah.
I can hear you now because you're speaking.
Oh, nice. Great. Stephanie Nero Todd was speaking for a moment and you couldn't hear her. So let's go ahead and go with Stephanie first, and then we can read the chat box.
What I was saying is, I think that I get so busy with my clients throughout the day that I fail to do, you know, these self-relaxation exercises because that was relaxing to me. I barely get a chance to do that. And so that was much needed. I feel so much better because as therapists or whatever position we have, like I said, we all get boggled in our day to where we don't have that time to take that time, that 5 minutes or 3 minutes to just, you know, close our eyes and just breathe for a second in between appointments. So that was much needed. And I really, really appreciate that because I really needed that.
Oh, good. I am really glad. So, yeah, sometimes we don't have the time, but we do have like 5 seconds, right? We do have like 5 seconds just to be like, take a breath. And sometimes that's all we have. Sometimes that's all the time that we have. You know, so yeah, sometimes it's hard to even get 5 minutes, but we can get 5 seconds. And some of this was a longer practice, this last one that I did, but supportive touch, you can just, you know, do quickly. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie.
Did you want me to read the chat box?
Sure. Or is there, does anybody else have questions? Or thoughts or comments or anything?
What were the equanimity phrases again that you used?
Yeah, so everyone is on their own life journey. I am not the cause of this person's suffering, nor is it entirely within my power to make it go away, even though I wish I could. And then moments like these can be difficult to bear. Yet I may still try to help if I can.
Like one of the comments in the box. There's a lot of them. It's a reminder, reminded me that I do not always have control to help others. This reminds me how much I forget me. You know, and then let's see. Here's a few more in tune with myself, more centered. That's what they felt after the exercise, more calm, content, and happy. A bit sleepy, relaxed. It's hard to keep my mind focused on the practice versus thinking about everything I could be doing.
Mhm.
And then I also heard someone say that your teaching is really lovely because it's there's no shame in it.
Mm.
I'm trying to find that comment. You teach us without shame attached. So I've started to take the time most mornings before work to practice mindfulness or self-compassion meditations. It actually helps to be a better clinician and supervisor. I share self-compassion exercises with clients. It's good to take our own advice and apply the same principles to ourselves. Practice reminded me of the phrase that people are doing the best they can with what they have.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Wonderful comments. It's just really very rich, really rich. Speaking of self-compassion, so I had the opportunity to practice a little actually, two things. While in the last hour, these things come up all the time, right? Opportunities to practice self-compassion. So one was just the sound, right? The sound, I don't know what happened with the sound. I think my speaker here maybe died. So an opportunity to practice self-compassion, rather than, so self-compassion is, which I'll get more into next week, not beating yourself up so much, when things don't go as expected or as you planned or as you would have hoped. This is life. These things happen. So, my whatever happened with my speaker happened and wasn't functioning. I don't know if all of you had the wonderful opportunity to hear my cat scratching during the meditation on the door. Did you hear that? No, okay. So my cat was by the door and she was scratching. So, so this also is an opportunity for me to practice my own self-compassion, right? So, I could have taken the cat. I could be saying to myself, I could have taken the cat, put the cat outside, but here she was, So it's a choice point, right? We have these choice points. We can either beat ourselves up or criticize ourselves, judge ourselves, or we can say, you know what, this is life. This is what happens. We're human. These things happen. But I'm going to be talking more about that next week and the week after.
Did you want to share the event that's free?
Yeah, do you want to just pull it up?
There. I put it in the I dropped it in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah, so this is another opportunity to, it's a free event to practice mindfulness and self-compassion that Nadia just put in the chat.
Yes, and also to, I wanted to encourage you all, I know that you're about to hop off, but to follow us and to also complete your GIPRA evaluation. I know that you're about to hop off and it's something to just jump off, but I really, the way that we keep these events free is to keep the evaluations going. And then also we'll keep you posted on your CEUs that give us some time to process them, as also we'll post the recording as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this space. Thank you so much for being kind to one another and just sharing this joyful moment with us and bringing your full selves in. Again, thank you. And also bring a friend next time. We have 2 more to go. And thank you so much for being here.
Will that evaluation be on email?
It will also be in the email. There's a follow-up email, but it's also in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm not that savvy with computers, so I just want it'll be easier to look at it through an email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Do we have time for a poem, Nadia?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I cut off your poem?
No.
I'm so sorry.
We have 2 minutes.
Go for it.
Okay,
Yes.
people want to stay for just this really beautiful poem. This is by John O'Donohue, and it's called Benacht, which means blessing in Gaelic. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, and may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the currach of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. So I hope to see everyone next week, and have a wonderful week.